At 18, in the religion that I was raised in, I was offered to go and do missionary service. So I put my hand up and says, yeah, yeah, sign me up. And I actually selected I would prefer to probably not learn a language, and I'll explain why. Because in school, I'm the type of guy. So, like I said, golf. I was so invested in the golf, and I fell in love with golf. So I was so passionate about it, and I'm the type of guy that when I'm passionate about something, it clicks, and I learn really really quick, and I get better very very quickly. So in school, I wasn't interested in languages. I'll be honest. Like I tried to learn French, bonjour, like a couple of basics, nothing has, I can't remember anything. German as well, I did that for a couple of years. No use. Just no use. So, but I just wasn't passionate about those languages at all. So I never thought that I was kind of a language guy, to be honest. I thought it was just English and that'll do. So when I was filling in like sort of my papers, like where would you like to go? Or like, are you happy enough to like travel here or there or learn a language? I was like, nah, not really. English speaking suits me. I'm happy enough with that. Anyway, I got a call, like a letter to kind of go and serve as a missionary, and it turns out that I was called to go to this place called Hong Kong, and I was like, right, where's that? So looked it up, found out I was learning Cantonese. Was kind of really nervous initially, and I started learning a little bit about Hong Kong, and I then found out that the local Chinese takeaways, all these people are kind of from Hong Kong, and they're speaking Cantonese. So I was like asking them little questions and stuff. I was like, this is gonna be fun. This is gonna be a challenge. So anyway, I then took off and did that for a period of 2 years. They sent us to America first, and for a couple of months, from like people who had kind of done the same thing as us, but they were finished. Right, so they came in to kind of give us like learn the ropes a little bit. Here's a few basics to kind of help you survive and get by and communicate with the locals. So anyway, after the 2 months, me and a few of the other lads and a few other girls that were there, we thought we could speak the language. After 2 months, we're like, oh, we've got the basics down. It's going to be easy. So we set off in the plane. We arrive in Hong Kong, and we get off the plane, and it's late at night. I remember, and we're walking through the exit, and I could hear over in the airport Chinese, but I turned to one of the guys. I was like, are you understanding any of this? And he's like, no. And then I turned to another guy. He's like, yeah, it must be Mandarin, right? Because it's a different dialect, right? And so then we get out and we ask one of the more seasoned guys, yo, is that Mandarin? Because we're not understanding this. He goes, no, guys, that's Cantonese. I was like, oh dear, I'm in trouble. I don't understand anything. So anyway, I ended up living with a bunch of like native Hong Kong guys. And during the start of my sort of service period there, I spent time in Macau. So I was out there for about 6 months initially. For during the 2 years, actually, I spent 1 year in Macau and 1 year in Hong Kong. So I love both places very much. And in our recent trip back about 2 months ago now, I spent a few days in Macau meeting a few close friends that I've made. So, I started in Macau. What I found very strange was there's no English signs. Whereas in Hong Kong, at least you get some English signs and then the Chinese. Whereas in Macau, because of the Portuguese influence, there's the Portuguese language and then there's Chinese. So I'm looking going, oh dear, like how do I know where I'm going? Because people will either refer to something in the Portuguese or the Chinese, normally using Cantonese for the Chinese. So I'll tell you something, I had a headache every single night. Every time I came home, I was like, oh my goodness, how am I going to get through this? How am I going to learn this language? But I suffered for that. Like those 6 months were really difficult because the native people I was living with, they just kept speaking Cantonese and wouldn't really respond to me in English. Their English was like okay, but they just preferred speaking Cantonese, so they kept doing that. And every time I went out in the street, everyone was speaking Cantonese, and everyone I met with was like speaking Cantonese. And any sort of service projects we did, everyone was speaking Cantonese, and I was like, oh my goodness, I've got to learn this language. So I got my head down, put my head in the books, and I used to take out like a notepad and pen, and I would use the Yale romanization. Because trying to learn Chinese, whether it be Mandarin or Cantonese, going character to character, you're going to be there forever. So I would write down. I learned sort of the Yale romanization to help me with the pronunciation. So if I heard something, I was like, okay, so that must be that. And then I would ask questions all the time. I would always ask the native, like, how do you say that right? And what's the tone? Because obviously it's a tonal language. So Oh, okay, right, okay, I think I've got it. And then I would repeat it over in my head. So I just randomly in the house or out in the street, I'd just be speaking Cantonese in my head to myself all the time and then trying to practice. And so I just did that. And then during that process, probably in those first 6 months of my time out there, like I just started to fall in love with it. And then, like you mentioned at the very start, people start to pay you a compliment, and you're like, oh, this feels good. Like they appreciate my effort. They can see that I'm at least trying. Because some other people that were out doing the same sort of thing as me, they didn't really try. They really didn't. There was some people had been there 2 years and only really had the very, very basics, couldn't really string like proper conversations together. So I was really motivated. I was like, that's it. I'm gonna really put my head down, and I got quite good. After those 6 months, I'd say I could at least speak the basics, and my pronunciations and tones were quite good. And then I just kept adding vocab, and I started learning Chinese characters. And then by the end of the 2 years, I'd learned 3,000 plus characters as well. So which maybe half of them I remember today. I need to revise them because I don't really read anything in Chinese. So you forget quite a lot. But so yeah, that's kind of why Cantonese came into my life.